Imagine, if you will, the dawn of time. Not with a bang, maybe, but more like a hesitant gather, a curious hunt. For millennia, humanity was just this tiny speck in a vast wilderness. Our lives completely dictated by nature.
Right, just moving with the seasons, following the herds.
Exactly. And this, you could say, is really Act One of our epic today, the story of how we went from these wandering bands to, well, something we now call civilization.
Indeed. And that word itself, civilization, has a really fascinating journey, actually.
Oh, yeah.
It popped up in 18th century France, civilization,
Mm-hmm.
and it basically meant, becoming
Well,
civil.
like learning table manners.
Sort of, and moving from a noisy tavern brawl to a more polite salon gathering. It was the opposite of barbarism, which back then conjured up images pretty far removed from that refined society.
Right, so less about knowing which wine pairs with mammoth steak,
Oh, definitely not that.
and more about the basic instructions of how we organize ourselves. But then, fast forward to the 19th century, and you get thinkers like John Lubbock starting to see civilization as this upward climb, like a marker of societal progress compared to what they call primitive cultures then.
Which is a really important point to pause on.
Yes, absolutely. It's vital to stress, and the sources we're looking at stress this too, that civilization isn't about race. It's not about inherent superiority. It's this long-term thing, an evolution.
Mm.
It has seasons, it grows, it declines, it changes.
Precisely. Civilizations are fluid, they last a long time, but they shift profoundly.
Yeah.
And it's understanding these huge transformations where the insights of Alvin Toffler and Heidi Toffler become so incredibly relevant.
Ah, yes, the Tofflers
Hmm.
are modern-day observers of societal earthquakes, you could say.
Good way to put it.
Forget crystal balls. They were looking at the actual tremors shaking the ground beneath our feet. Alvin Toffler, especially with Future Shock back in 1970, and then the third wave in 1980, and later his work with Heidi Toffler, like creating a new civilization.
Key texts.
Now, quick detour here, because some people get this wrong. Despite the name, they weren't connected to the Canadian Toronto School. Nope. Alvin and Heidi Toffler were American.
Firmly based in the U.S.
Right. Spent lots of time in New York. They even did this amazing thing where they took blue-collar jobs in Cleveland just for research.
Talk about immersive field work.
Seriously. Alvin taught at the New School for Social Research, too. And fun fact, their archives from 55 to 84, they're at Columbia University Libraries. So definitely homegrown thinkers.
And what's so powerful about their work is how they identify these massive civilizational waves, each one driven by huge changes in how we produce things, how we organize society.
It's like history unfolds in these distinct acts, isn't it? Each with its own signature technology and way of life.
Exactly.
So think of this deep dive as our three-part saga. Act 1, the Agrarian Age. Act 2, the Industrial Revolution. And Act 3, the Information Age.
Each wave crashing in and just completely reshaping the landscape of how humans live.
Totally. And before we dive into that first wave, we should touch on Alvin Toffler's big idea, future shock.
Crucial concept.
It's not just being surprised by a new phone, right? It's deeper. It's like the societal jet lag. Disorientation when change within your own culture happens too fast to really process.
The ground shifting under your feet.
And the Tofflers argued that we right now are living smack in the middle of that transition. We're like the last generation with real roots in the old ways and the very first to be fully immersed in the new. Kind of mind-bending.
It really is. And, here's an interesting contrast. Alvin and Heidi Toffler saw industrial society itself as the engine driving that second wave.
Right.
Which is a different angle from, say, the Frankfurt School.
Yeah.
They looked at that same industrial system and saw it breeding totalitarianism because of its relentless focus on profit.
Same huge force, but different interpretations of where it leads. Fascinating.
Definitely.
Okay, let's rewind. Way back. Over 10,000 years ago, Act 1, the Agrarian Age. This is the moment humanity decided to, well, literally put down roots.
Yeah, before this, you had these small nomadic groups, always moving. Survival meant finding the next berry bush, tracking the next animal.
Constantly adapting to nature's whims, hand to mouth.
Absolutely.
Oh.
A life deeply tied to the immediate environment. But then came this monumental shift, the agricultural revolution.
The game changer.
As Alvin and Heidi Toffler put it, this was the first point of social development. People started farming, cultivating land, domesticating animals, basically creating their own food supply in one place.
So those scattered temporary camps slowly became settled villages, Rural communities started popping up, and you see the first hints of trade, right? People swapping surplus grain or tools.
hmm It's like, for ages, humanity was a tumbleweed, just blown around. The agricultural revolution was that tumbleweed finally landing in good soil, sending down roots, and starting to grow.
Great analogy. And suddenly, land wasn't just something to walk across, it became vital, something to own, to nurture.
And this fundamental shift had some massive ripple effects, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, huge. First off, land became the ultimate prize, the most valuable commodity.
It's like everyone suddenly realized owning a good patch of earth was like having a personal food ATM, basically. Wealth and security all tied up in the soil.
And with that comes consequence number two, the rise of a ruling elite. Power wasn't just about physical strength anymore.
Right. It started shifting towards who controlled the most land. Ambitious leaders became like super gardeners, always trying to expand their plots, their influence,
Like playing Monopoly, but with fields instead of hotels.
pretty much. And flowing from that, you saw wealth gaps appearing, distinct social classes forming. Just like in a garden, some plants get more sun, more water. Well, some people accumulated more resources and power. Hierarchy starts to set in.
Then consequence number four, the slow death of the nomadic lifestyle. People built permanent homes, established communities that lasted. They started building, well, not just fences for fields, but social structures too, defining relationships, roles, responsibilities.
Building the framework for society.
Exactly. And finally, the agrarian age really cemented the importance of family, tribe, community. We also see the division of labor kick in, the birth of the first specialized professions.
Like in an early farming household, right?
Yeah.
Someone plants, someone tends the animals, maybe someone gets really good at making or fixing tools. Everyone has a role in keeping the garden or the farm going.
Okay, let's hit the fast forward button. We're moving through millennia of harvests, heading towards the late 17th century. Europe, North America mainly. The air starts to hum differently. There's a new kind of power vibrating.
hmm We've entered Act Two, the Industrial Revolution,
And this wasn't about the gentle turning of soil. This was the roar of the machine.
a truly massive transformation. The catalyst, obviously, was the invention and spread of machines. This just fundamentally altered everything, how people lived, where they worked, even how they fought wars.
Farmers start moving to cities for factory jobs. Weapons technology just explodes.
Right. And Alvin and Heidi Toffler make this great point about the pace agriculture kept changing relatively slowly. But industry, bang, explosive advancement. They called it the civilization of dynamic chimneys.
Love that phrase. Picture it. Rolling fields replaced by towering factories, smoke billowing, the clang of machinery drowning out birdsong. It's like the world suddenly grew this giant mechanical heart.
And just like land was key in Wave 1, Wave 2 had a different treasure.
Yeah, the focus shifts, doesn't it? From what's on the land to what's under it.
Exactly. Mineral resources, coal, precious metals, later oil, natural gas. These become the fuel for the industrial machine, the essential ingredients for this whole new way of life.
And this industrial beast brought its own wave of consequences. First up, mass everything.
Everything gets scaled up.
Mass communication printing press, telegraph ideas spreading faster than ever, mass production, think Henry Ford's assembly line churning out identical cars.
Like Model Ts flying off the line.
Right. Then mass education needed to create a literate workforce for the factories, mass entertainment newspapers, early movies, and, more ominously, weapons of mass destruction. The factory could produce immense power, for good or ill.
That rapid industrial development and mass production capability, that was absolutely the defining feature of the second wave. It touched nearly everything.
Consequence number three, the rise of bureaucracy and the need for official communication.
You needed complex systems to manage these huge factories, these corporations.
Standardization became king. Everything had to be uniform for efficiency, even early forms of recycling, maybe trying to reuse materials. And this is where corporations really take off, these big hierarchical organizations running the show.
And family structures changed too, didn't they?
Yeah, that traditional extended family, so vital in the agrarian age, it starts to shrink. The focus shifts to the nuclear family, working dad, mom, kids, maybe a leaner unit better suited for the industrial world where people might work in different places.
A more mobile unit, perhaps?
Possibly. And as national industries grew, so did the power of nation-states. Political communication becomes crucial for managing these big industrialized countries. Public opinion starts to matter in a new way.
The industrial machine needed strong leadership, ways to connect with the workforce, to the public.
And finally, Wave 2 recognized you need a skilled workforce. So universal education expands, basic literacy becomes more common. You couldn't run complex machines or follow safety rules if you couldn't read, right?
Made perfect sense for the time, a necessary adaptation.
Right, buckle up. We're about to slingshot into the most recent and definitely the fastest chapter. Late 20th century brings Act 3, the information age.
And this one just exploded onto the scene, didn't it? Often overlapping with the industrial age still chugging along.
Totally. And its defining feature, not muscle, not land, but the brain, human intellect.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When does this wave end? Will we even be around to see its conclusion? It's moving so fast.
It's a dizzying thought. And the economic engine shifts again. The successful countries aren't necessarily the ones with the most land or coal anymore.
No, it's the ones who can generate, process, and sell information and innovation. Suddenly, things like management expertise, culture movies, music technology, software, education, training, advanced medicine, these become the hot commodities.
Intangible goods, products of the mind.
Exactly. It's like the world transformed into this giant interconnected neural network. Ideas, data flowing instantly across borders like electricity.
Like silicon brain power. And this new reality, it brought its own dramatic shakeup.
Oh, absolutely. One major consequence.
Yeah.
We've seen the weakening of traditional nation states. At the same time, there's this resurgence of regional identity, regional autonomy.
You see it in places like Scotland, Catalonia, the whole Brexit saga. The network, in a way, lets smaller nodes operate more independently on the world stage.
It does. And it's not just regions. Think about the growing power of non-governmental organizations, NGOs, or multinational corporations that operate almost like states sometimes. Even international criminal cartels and terrorist groups leverage this network.
New power players emerging outside the old state system.
Precisely. And we started talking about this era using terms like information age, obviously, but also space age, electronic era. And Marshall McLuhan's global village concept really nailed it, even before the internet as we know it.
That idea of the world shrinking through instant communication, spot on.
And during this wave, we saw the collapse of entities that seemed totally permanent, didn't we?
Like dominoes falling. Yugoslavia, the Soviet Union, the Berlin Wall coming down. These were pillars of the old industrial world order struggling to cope with the speed and decentralization of the information network.
Another huge shift is this widespread questioning of authority. Traditional trust in institutions, religion, family, politicians, social organizations, it's declined quite a bit.
Why do you think that is?
Well, easy access to information, diverse viewpoints. It naturally fosters more independent thought, more critical evaluation. People challenge hierarchies more readily.
Makes sense. And of course, in the information age, what's the ultimate currency?
Knowledge itself, information, that's the core economic asset.
And finally, Wave 3 brought technologies that honestly felt like science fiction not long ago.
Right. Cloning, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, robotics, VR, AI, machine learning. These are the cutting-edge tools shaping this information-driven world.
So there it is, this grand, sweeping story of human civilization in 3 acts. From patiently working the land,
The agrarian age,
to the roaring factories,
the industrial revolution,
and now this lightning-fast flow of information.
the information age. Each wave fundamentally changing how we live, work, connect.
And as Alvin and Heidi Toffler saw so clearly, understanding these huge shifts gives us, well, crucial context for navigating right now, and maybe even anticipating what's next.
We really are at this unique point, aren't we? A generation with feet in different eras straddling these civilizational divides.
So think about it, you listening, where do you see these waves echoing in your own life? Are you still tied to agrarian rhythms, caught in industrial gears? Or fully surfing the information wave?
Maybe a mix of all three.
Probably. And here's a final thought to chew on. With this third wave moving so incredibly fast, how is that changing our experience of shock? Our ability to adapt?
Are we just in a permanent state of future shock now? Or are we actually getting better at navigating constant change, developing new coping mechanisms?
Good question. And what comes next? What might a fourth wave look like? What will be the defining commodity, the key resource of that future era?
That's the big unknown, isn't it? It really invites you to think about this ongoing evolution and our small part within it.